Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Leah Swanberg. Welcome to tonight's webinar. I am joined by Cindy Wasser, founder of Hope Springs Fertility Law, and the illustrious Jan Silverman, counselor to all of us, really, and to the surrogacy and infertility community. And the webinar tonight is really an opportunity. We went out to our community and asked for questions that that they had, and many of them we are as an organization stuck on, and we really wanted to bring them to two people that we really respect to get the opinions, both legally and socially, on how to navigate some of this tough stuff. And so I'm really hoping that tonight people will provide us questions. I have my Instagram open, cfc.families and Sacred Surrogacy. So we would love to have your questions come in. But I think the overarching question is something a social issue or a legal issue? So I would love to get into it with you guys now. So many of these questions were posed to us from surrogates as well as intended parents. And the first one came from a surrogate. She is recently matched and planning to leave her spouse, is afraid to tell her agency, the intended parents, and just doesn't know if legally she can still proceed. So Jan, if you have any advice, and then Cindy, if you can pop in on the legal side of not being divorced yet not being married as a surrogate.
Okay, well, I'm always going to begin by stressing the need for honesty. You know, surrogacy is many-fold, but one of the biggest folds that I will suggest that occur is that there has to be a respectful, trusted relationship between the surrogate and her intended parents. And probably the most important thing is that strong communication, trusted communication exists between them. So I am always going to encourage for as much honesty as possible in this situation. You know, hopefully, and this is certainly the ideal situation, the surrogate and the intended parents have had the opportunity to get to know each other, that they have had time to grow a relationship, sometimes not as long a time as we would like it to be, but that's still that they've, over the period of both their dating period, of the period when they're negotiating their contracts, that there has been an opportunity that they are getting to know each other, working with each other, sharing ideas and thoughts. So as a starting point, I'm going to suggest that it has to be done in an open, honest manner, and that some of the supports that are going to be needed to help the surrogate during that challenging period is going to be there. Will have been talked about ahead of time in their counseling session, because partners alone are never the only source of support in a journey, ever. So will have been talked about, and that now we're going to move from this, where we thought we were going to be, to where we now need to be. But I'm curious to hear what Cindy has to say about the legal aspect of that, and then maybe we'll get back to another comment or two.
So if anybody, first of all, if anybody is thinking that Jan and I are likely to get into a good sparring match over an issue, you'll be sadly disappointed. I can't imagine ever disagreeing with a word that comes out of this angel's mouth. However, so obviously I agree with everything. But however, just from the legal point of view, I think it's critical that the surrogate disclose what's going on in the family life, because the intended parents may be from a country where her marital status is critical to their ability to be recognized as parents once they have the baby back home.
Okay.
And we may have to deal with that upfront in the contract. Their lawyer in that country may need to know to see if there's any workaround of what we're doing. If they're Canadian, the only issue we have possibly is when we're dealing with British Columbia, where the law says whoever is an intended parent on on the contract must be on the birth certificate, but they don't specify whether the surrogate if she has a partner, whether the partner has to be on it or not. But if they have to do a court order, it could come up as an issue. In any other province or territory, her marital status is not really mandatory. There are some provinces where the law says there is a presumption that the surrogate is the mother of the child. And if there is a spouse or partner, he or she may be considered the other parent. And the judge, when they get the court order after the birth, will say, okay, they're not, the intended parents are. So it could be tricky, and it's really just important for the lawyers to know right away what's going on so we can check the laws in that province and also check with the foreign lawyer to make sure the intended parents won't have any difficulty. And with the support of the agency, I just can't see why the surrogate wouldn't, well, I mean, I understand, of course, why she doesn't want to come forward from that viewpoint, but there's no reason because she'll get so much support.
Okay, excellent.
Can I just add one other point?
Absolutely.
Which is to, as many people will know, often being on your own can be better for you than being in a relationship that does not work. So just because you started off as a couple and now are going solo does not necessarily mean at all that it's going to be more issues. If anything, there may often be different issues, but less challenging, less emotionally fraught with that sort of pain.
Excellent. That's great. And I just had another question similar come in through Instagram, and it's an intended parent who she says that she is signed up to be an intended parent with her spouse, and she is realizing that he does not necessarily want children and she wants to go forward alone, and just wondered if she'll match. So I'd like to answer that, and then legally if she can be an intended mother with embryos created with him. Cindy, I think that's a you question. We have lots of intended parents that match, whether they are single or partnered, gay, straight. There is a surrogate for everyone. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but there really, really is. And if you are thinking that that your marriage or your relationship is coming to an end, definitely, as Jan said, letting everyone know up front so that you are going into this journey really congruent with, this is who I am and this is how I'm proceeding. Cindy, legally, could an intended mother with embryos created by her partner go ahead with those embryos without the partner?
If the partner consented, which is highly unlikely. So the consent regulations require the couple, as they were, to have indicated what they want to do with the embryos in the event that they separate, divorce, die, simply complete their family, and they have excess embryos. And so it becomes a family law issue, because if she goes ahead with those embryos, he may still be liable as his child if he's genetically connected and have support obligations. So they're going to need to speak to some family lawyers first. Maybe they can make some arrangement. Maybe it won't be seen as a support issue, but it's pretty tricky. And my guess is virtually every lawyer would tell the partner not to agree.
Okay. Jan, I know that you run a support group for single people going through family building. Can you just tell us what that's called and where this intended mom could find it?
With pleasure. So the group is called OOO, which stands for On Our Own. Okay. And it is a group that was started, probably about 20 years ago, to give women and the occasional man who is going on the journey of parenting on their own an opportunity to connect, learn, support one another, create networks, hang with one another. It's kind of phenomenal, if I do say so myself. And quite a number of, not quite a number, but a fair number have used surrogates. We have 2 right now that are in the process of using surrogates as well. And it's pretty awesome to see what people on their own, when they have that strong desire, strong, more than desire, passion to make a family, how they do it. And they do it magnificently. And I just want to reiterate what Leah said, which is I have talked to so many surrogates over the last number of years. We won't disclose right now. And there are surrogates that'll say, I want to work with a single person because I know what it's like to be single. And I've had ones that I want to work with a heterosexual couple, or I want to work with a same-sex couple. So when people think I'm never going to be chosen because, not true, not true.
Agreed. So we will post the link to the On Our Own group, because I think it will be an absolutely great resource for you.
And I'll add that
I'd love to host one of your meetings at my place with some really good wine.
And we meet on Zoom now, by the way. And because we've been getting people from BC, from Quebec, from all over that are joining in now, because that's the magic of Zoom. And then we have an awesome summer party on my deck. But then you have to be in Toronto for that.
Yeah, worth their trip. So my next question came in from intended parents. They had this question. They want to ask their administrative assistant in their dental office to be their surrogate and to pay, I'm going to use the word reimburse, her through their company as an employee. They asked if ethically that was a good idea, was their words. So Jan, ethically, is it a good idea to hire a current employee as your surrogate? And then Cindy, I'll ask you legally if they can put that on the payroll.
Oh, my first reaction is probably better to keep church and state separated a little bit. I'm always a little concerned about things coming back to nip you in the butt. I think it's fine to approach somebody that you know, and see if they would be willing to do it, because if you don't ask, you're never going to find out. But I do think that this is something that you have to tread carefully, because again, should something go awry, I think that the implications would be rather high. But again, Cindy, you're the legal person.
So there's at least two legal factors to consider here. One is the imbalance at work of the employer asking the administrative assistant, so this power imbalance, to do it. Now, I have had this very situation, and I suggested that the surrogate get independent legal advice before we began anything. No discussions, just they brought it up. She said she was interested, sent her to an employment lawyer to make sure that she understood all of the ramifications of doing this in the workplace, what her rights would be, and to have independent legal advice from an employment standards point. Then I sent the intended parents to another employment lawyer, because I don't practice employment law, to get independent legal advice about what risks they were putting themselves in as an employer. I thought, honestly, that would be the end of it, that they'd both walk away from their advice and say, we're not touching this. But shockingly, they felt very content to do it. So I was thrilled. So then the next issue that you raised, which this did not come up in our case, was giving her the reimbursements through salary. I don't think I have to be an employment lawyer to say no. I mean, it's fine unless you get caught, of course, but they're going to be in a lot of trouble. I don't know how they would do it. The law is very clear that it's not compensation, so you're only reimbursing for expenses and you need receipts for them. So I'm not even sure how the surrogate employee gives them her receipts for mileage, for groceries, internet, whatever, legal advice, and how that comes out on a payroll without bookkeepers and accountants and everybody going, oh, don't want to see or hear this. And if an agency is involved, it's a big no. I would say do not put yourself in that situation.
Okay. So Jan, I have another one, very similar. I believe we've worked on something similar to this, and I just can't recall whatever happened with these people. So they have embryos created by an egg donor. The woman and her husband have gone to the woman's adult daughter to ask if she would be the surrogate. And I know we've talked about this. I think it was a very long time ago, but I can't remember. And someone sent us that. So it's still something being passed around as either an urban legend or something someone really wants to do. Not quite sure.
I will say, yes, we did have that. And
Okay.
that was something that ultimately did not go through. And this was quite a number of years ago. And I think it speaks to a similar thing that Cindy just raised, which is the sense of coercion or perceived coercion. It also is an incredibly challenging thing for a daughter to be put in a position of saying no to a mom.
Okay.
And I will tell you that knowing that this is going to be something that would be tackled in a counseling session, I think the likelihood of it going through would not be all that likely. Now, that being said, there are cases and there are cases, and we all know that. And I think, as we have been discussing a little previously, that it speaks to the need. Well, it speaks to how important, of course, I am going to suggest a counseling session is, and that it is not just something that you think we are rubber stamping as counselors, that our purpose is to really look through the issues, implication counseling, the possible implications of the situation. So this would very much be a situation that I would say would need counseling both separately and then a really strong counseling session together.
Okay.
Where people really had the opportunity to thrash out, because there's never a blanket statement that goes, ooh, definitely not. We've been doing this, all of us, way too long to know that there really may be a daughter that really, really would like to see this from, or vice versa. But I think that it's a bit of a sticky situation and really has to be treated with all the has to be treated with that sense of seriousness, because ultimately we are looking at the lives of a child who will be weirdly connected to both, but also to that relationship. And I will say we all have daughters. The three of us have daughters. And the relationship all through different ways. Isn't that funny?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Mine are adopted.
I can't even imagine going to my 15-year-old and asking her if I could borrow her shoes.
But Cindy, interestingly enough, we have seen in the media time and time again, women stepping forward, bringing themselves forward to their gay sons to be the surrogate.
The mother acting for the surrogate is not uncommon at all.
Why, like for me, I feel like, oh, I would absolutely do that for my child. Yeah. And is it the ick factor of the stepfather? Is it society saying, we have this power dynamic with our children? I mean, I think everyone who's ever had a teenager knows the power dynamic, swings very differently the other way. But Jan, do you feel the same way if it's the mom coming forward to be
You
the
mean
surrogate? Like the mom of the, like a mom being a surrogate for her son and the son's husband or son's wife.
I think their family dynamics are incredibly complicated. And I'm never going to say a blanket no, because as I said earlier, there are always going to be situations that you go, yeah. But I am saying that this is something that I would suggest that counseling separately, counseling together, all parties concerned.
Yeah.
Definitely not a no, but definitely a tread carefully.
And when you do these assessments initially with someone who is, coming forward saying, I need to have a surrogate, the doctor has, referred them to you, and who do you work for? Do you work for the intended parents in assessing their surrogate? Do you work for the surrogate assessing the intended parents? How does that work so that it's really unbiased?
Oh, that is such a good question. And I don't have a quick and ready answer because I'm thinking
Where's
about
your papers? You had all your notes.
Oh, I do, but that's a very good question because, who are we working for? Probably when I'm doing an assessment for the clinic, any clinic that I'm maybe working with, then I am representing the clinic.
Okay.
So I am saying, are there any implications? Are there psychosocial aspects? Are there any implications that could potentially cause a problem in the clinic setting? Because
Okay.
that's probably, but when I'm doing one more independently, I'd like to think that there's a piece of me that's looking at all of the above,
Okay.
that I'm trying to think about how will it impact on the surrogate? How will it impact on the intended parent or parents? And also, how will it impact on the agency? That has to count as
You
well.
know what's interesting? When I think of you, and I've known you 20 years, I have a totally different answer for you.
What
I
is
don't
it?
know why. My answer is you're working for that kid that's coming along.
Well, ultimately, but I can't say that yet because that's going to open up another door. And because I'm so
I
without,
know.
I,
But
We don't open that door.
so my question is this: if a surrogate comes to you and she's doing her assessment, because this is one of the questions I got, will the clinic tell me if my intended parents have a surrogate with another company in the United States? Will the counselor tell me if my intended parent said that they had been charged with a crime or had thoughts of strange things or were on medication, or like, do you report back to the surrogate or the intended parents? Like, how do we, as the three of us, how do we keep people safe, I guess? And Cindy, that would be the same thing. Do
Lots of
people have
legal
to tell
issues.
you? Do
Well,
people have to tell you?
yeah, so there are legal issues. Even in the scenario we were talking about before, where the parents ask the child to be a surrogate, we have to make sure that the agreement is entered into by all parties voluntarily without undue influence. So how do I establish undue influence? Well, the surrogate and the intended parents have their own lawyer who they should be able to speak freely with. So if I'm acting for the child surrogate, I'm saying, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Anything you're feeling. Can I be certain that she's not feeling afraid to even tell me she feels pressure? And so then I have to rely on the therapist who's done the assessment to say she's fine or she's not fine. But in this other situation where we're talking about disclosure of medication, disclosure of having another journey at the same time, all these other things, So, they're all different. We have to know about medication, but we need to know that the clinic knows, that the doctors know that a surrogate is on medication, or if it's the donors at the time that they've made the embryos, what medication they're on, just to make sure that the embryos and the surrogate are safe to carry.
Right.
So that's an absolute. So we like complete disclosure of medication. And this comes up all the time because since COVID, according to my GP, 99.999% of the population is on some form of anxiety, antidepressant, ADHD medication to get them through each day, and especially the medical caregiver community. Like they are burned out. So there's some that are okay for pregnancy and there are some are not. So like it's not a thing that maybe it used to be in the past where people were afraid to say, I'm on depression drugs or anti-anxiety meds. And ADHD is just blown up. Everybody's, one in like 6 people have it and are on meds or something, like crazy number. But again, we need the clinic to tell us people can be on it, make embryos, do whatever. And if that has to be changed, there has to be disclosure, because the intended parents need to know. It could take, depending on where the surrogate lives or the donor, anywhere months to change medication.
I also want to add, though, that there's that trust component again. We interview myself, the counselors that I work with, we interview. All have been doing this for many years at this point.
Yeah.
But we are only as good. That's not exactly right. But we rely on the information that the person in question, be it the gestational carrier, the surrogate, or the intended parent, for that matter, for the information that they disclose. And that's why it is so important to have a good check balance system. So when you work with an agency, you want to make sure that there is some initial screening that is going on. There's one. At clinics, there will be a doctor or a nurse that is also going to be reviewing information. There's going to be a counselor reviewing information. There's going to be a lawyer reviewing, there are different people, because, and I am going to say this, I have had people, be not honest with me, and that's not just surrogates. I have had plenty of intended parents that have covered up something as well, that they're afraid that's going to disqualify them. And I'm not saying everyone by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't want anyone to think that this is, just one group of people, that there's such a concern. This is so wanted. And as Cindy said, the tide has turned over the last few years. What we may have said absolutely not to 10 years ago, we're not saying absolutely not to anymore. We live in the real world. But that's why, again, when you are looking through agencies that you are using, clinics that you are using, you want to make sure that it's multi-tiered. Because I will tell that at clinics that I work with, if we have a concern, it's going to be raised with this person, and then it might be raised with another, so that we can get a full picture of the person if there's an area of concern.
Yeah, and we will work in the community with lawyers as well, with the other lawyers. So if a client says to me, an intended parent client says, I do have another journey going on in this other place, then we have to make a parenting or a birth plan, especially if they're close in time, to say, well, what are you planning to do? Is one of you going to be in, California and the other one's going to be in Toronto? Like they're a month apart. Like, what are you going there, coming back? Because the surrogate has a right to know that. The agency needs to know that, to support the surrogate, to say, oh my God, how are we doing this? We're responsible for the birthing arrangements, right? That's the support you give. And I think the therapist wants to support the surrogate through that, and the parents to say, hey, what's your plan? Let's talk about the stress.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And I think that as humans, to get our needs met, we do the things we need to do to get them met. And sometimes that, we have seen people say things to counselors and to clinicians that may not be as accurate as we would all like to see. And so really being able to work with lawyers and counselors and agencies and people that really can sort of prop the situation up if necessary, because at the end of the day, our goal is healthy children and healthy families, and surrogates walking away feeling as though they have contributed to a family that is so wanted. And on that note, Jan, you said we're doing things that we used to say absolutely no to. So next question is, I have no children. I'd like to be a surrogate, and I'd like my intended parents to compensate me should I lose my uterus and not be able to have children of my own in the future. Jan, let's talk about ethics committees at clinics, who runs them, who's on them, and why they now exist. And then Cindy, talk about the legal contracts that you may have been involved in that with surrogates without kids. Not sure if you have, but imagine it could be. Go ahead, Jan.
I'm going to guess there's no question. You just made this one up to get us to talk about this, which is great with me.
Jan,
this
is okay. So I'm going to be perfectly blunt. I'm going to be honest with this.
Okay.
We have seen for the first time in the last year or so, 2 years, we have seen a number of women who have surrogates, potential surrogates, who have never birthed a child, coming forward as surrogates. This was something that was raised at the ethics committee of one of the large clinics that I work with.
Okay, can you explain what an ethics committee is?
I was just going to go there. So,
perfect. Okay.
And all clinics, all accredited clinics should have ethics committees. It's part of what they are supposed to have.
Okay.
The ethics committee at this particular clinic includes counseling. It includes a lawyer. It includes an embryologist. It includes the head of nursing. It includes andrology. That's sperm.
Okay.
That's a sperm person. It includes a patient representation. It includes administrative staff, because administrative staff hears everything.
Okay.
I'm missing.
Surrogate? Is there a surrogate or a donor person?
No, because they're not all surrogate or donor issues, right?
Oh, okay. So this is just a general population grouping that somebody would come forward and say, here's my ethical.
Here's an issue. What are we going to do about it? What do you feel? And there is a decision-making tool that is utilized. It is not just based on what we call the yuck factor,
Okay.
which is a clinical term,
okay.
Meaning that you go, ooh.
Okay.
But you can't make a decision based on your own opinion on that. So there is a tool that looks at different ethical principles.
Okay.
And then it's a very organized way of looking at a case. So just to go up, that went before the idea of using surrogates that have never had a child was something that was raised.
Okay.
By somebody at the clinic, a nurse.
Okay.
And I'd be curious to hear what Cindy says, but the legal opinion was that it is not considered illegal. And that stood a lot, that gave it a lot of
prohibition.
But ethically, Jan, like
not an ethical question. It's a medical question, but it's not an ethical question.
Mm-hmm.
It's not ethics. There's a medical component to this, because you raised that second caveat. What happens if?
So did
What
the clinic say yes
the clinic said yes. So
based on, are there like further criteria, or is it sort of a
well,
blanket yes?
I will say that one of the things that this clinic does is that from a counseling perspective, uh, the potential carrier, the surrogate, has to meet with two different counselors.
Oh, okay.
Two. They have to be seen by two counselors in addition to kind of the usual other people that they're seen as well. So
Okay.
not just one counselor, because really kind of pushing for, do you understand, you know?
And how have those sessions been, Jan?
Well, um, in what way? It's hard to say.
Like,
I have
are people being approved? Like, it's one thing to say on paper, the committee has said, yes, they can come forward, but is it happening? And
Yes, it is
is it
happening.
successfully occurring? If
Yes, it is happening, and I'm sure Cindy has seen them as well.
okay,
I have one.
They're
okay,
not that uncommon.
I
okay,
think it's fabulous. And I think, let's just define what the issue was. As I understood it, the issue was one, that psychologically, if she's never been through the experience of pregnancy and birth, there might be an attachment problem with it. And then there's the medical issues, which are raised by this question. What if something happens and she could never have her own children? Is there a blame issue? Is there a liability issue? But a
correct.
psychological issue. Were there other issues, Jan, that we would say were a factor
Well,
before?
I'm thinking that was had to do with ability to hand over the child. What was the
Yeah.
motivation? Why are you doing this?
Right.
Yeah.
What if you're infertile yourself? Is it going to work? Are the success rates the same? I mean, I have so many questions. Like, I think we're going to have to do something with a doctor on this topic
That's
because
great. Yeah.
I'm very, very new to this ideal. And I believe many women are choosing not to have children. And as a mother of 5 with 3 adult children who I don't know what they will do in the future. Um, and I believe that, if I truly believe in choice, then I truly believe in choice. And so, Cindy, from a legal perspective, can they enter? Are the intended parents on the hook? Should she not be able to have her own child in the future? Where
So
are we
that depends on the agreement they make. So the typical surrogacy agreement says that the intended parents will not be liable for anything that may happen to the surrogate as a result of this, and that she accepts all the risks, and that she has had them explained to her by the fertility doctor. So when our role when speaking with a surrogate as a client is to say, have you had that discussion? Do you know what all the risks are? So if this particular issue comes up and she says, yeah, if something happens to me, I realize I may never be able to have children and I want them to pay for that, I have to say that's not going to happen. They're never going to agree. Like, what kind of damages is that? How much money are we talking about? And then they're just going to go to you as intended parents at the agency, Leah, and I imagine say, find us someone else. And so it just wouldn't work from a practical standpoint. The other thing is that virtually every province has legislation about surrogacy agreements that says these contracts are not enforceable for most of the terms, but will be used as evidence with respect to the intention of parentage, because the courts don't want anybody coming in with this kind of thing, or worse, they didn't pay for all my apples and or all that kind of thing, or she's eating too much tuna. But if the surrogate is an issue with parentage, the courts say, come on and fast, let's deal with it. So they're not going to want to have this litigious dispute over what's happened to her body parts and loss of organs or anything else.
Okay.
I want to add one other thing, which is when you asked about the nature of the ones I've seen so far, I would say that, and I have probably now seen maybe a half a dozen.
Okay.
And each one of those half dozen have said, I have no intention of having children of my own. Now,
Amazing.
I want the experience of pregnancy, or there's another factor going on, like someone doing it for someone that they, or something like that. But each one said, absolutely no intention of having a child of my own.
Okay.
Now, are they honest? I think at the moment they absolutely are honest. Will they feel differently in 5, 10 years? But a similar thing, it has come up with egg donation as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have to treat adult women as adult women with agency and not tell them that they are too frail to make decisions for themselves. I think our job legally is to point out legal consequences. Jan, your job is to point out social consequences. Leah, yours may be very practical consequences. That's why we work as a team. And that's why I think it's really important for anyone doing this journey to make sure they have phenomenal service providers who will work as a team for them.
Absolutely. And I truly believe in unique situations, whether it is a gestational carrier or surrogate going through a separation, whether it's someone who doesn't have children who we, I don't want to say flag, but we view as, potentially wanting some additional support, more opportunities in community to connect with other surrogates and share experience. I get excited about people that come in who may have, maybe from a different demographic. We are really, as an organization, getting curious about why 98% of our surrogates over 20 years are white women. We just are not a diverse community, and we are excited about being diverse. And so, diversity is women without children. Diversity is women in the BIPOC community. It's, Indigenous women on reserve. Like, there are so many different people that we have not been able to, connect with or support. So thank you on that. On this next piece, which kind of leads to that, is I have always said it's great news in Canada that a surrogate has never changed her mind, and it's horrible news in Canada because a surrogate has never changed her mind. And that because that hasn't happened, we don't know what would happen. And so, Jan, in your, I'm going to say 30 years.
Me too.
Have you seen it and it's just been kept quiet? Or have there really never been been cases in Canada where the surrogate or intended parents have changed their mind? And then, Cindy, what do we do when it happens? And do you know of it happening? If you want to share anecdotally.
I can honestly say that I have never had a full situation where someone has changed their mind. You mean where they've decided they don't want to have the baby or they don't want to relinquish the child? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
I have had, and I know this.
Yeah, the guys, the surrogate in Nova Scotia. Yeah.
So, but we had men quite a number of years ago that kind of changed their mind mid-pregnancy. And then we had a number of sessions together, and it kind of turned out that they were just really scared and nervous about a change in their life, and they were a little bit older. And needless to say, well, it isn't needless to say, but I will tell you the punchline, which is that they did keep their baby, and she became the apple of their eye, for sure, for sure. But that was one case. I will also remember a case where the surrogate had serious concerns about a single woman who was going to be
a mother of twins.
A mother of twins.
Yeah.
And that resulted in the need for some intervention by family
Services.
So that was two. And then there's another case recently that we've been dealing with, which is um, a pregnant surrogate and parents deciding that they don't want, that they're not staying together and they don't want to have the baby.
Yeah, I think movies portray surrogacy as either terrible or wonderful, and these spaces in between of people just needing room to grow as parents, and people going through deep pain as they become parents and separations and these types of things. I
Well,
hadn't even thought of those cases, Jen. I was thinking more of surrogates who decided not to give the baby up, and I haven't
we've never seen that except for the one where there was a good reason that she was concerned, not unwilling to give the baby up, but had concerns. But I just want to kind of, before we move on to Cindy or whatever, I just want to mention how unique surrogacy really is. You know, this is our lives, this is what we do all the time. There's a little bit of us that it's so common for us. You know, it's like second nature. I forget that people ever have babies through sexual intercourse and get pregnant, and then it's not even real to me. I have such a skewed view.
Yep.
But I want to kind of, you know, make it known to an audience that, you know, there really is uniqueness about the situation. I mean, even if we talk about the two largest populations, which will be our same sex couples, who are usually elated beyond words to have the opportunity to make a family. And then we have, not always, but sometimes, our heterosexual couples that have tried and tried and tried and tried and tried and tried and tried
Yeah.
and spent more money than I even want to talk about at this moment. And they go into the surrogacy situation with a whole different perspective than potentially the same sex couples. And I will add, not all heterosexual couples, many are just also thrilled to pieces that there's going to be an angel out there that's going to help them achieve the dream of having a family. But I think the part that I just want to touch on for 2 secs
Mhm.
is that the uniqueness of, because we take somebody that you probably never would have run into, your paths never would have crossed, your lives kind of, they're in different places altogether. And then they wind up becoming the most important person in your lives, be it the IP to the either direction. That all of a sudden, this person that, huh? Because, and there's something both unbelievably exciting and oh my God, but it's scary because often they come from very different backgrounds, very different communities, different socioeconomic um, standards. Um, and I think we put an interesting expectation to create a relationship like that, or a little bit slower than that, and then navigate at least a year's worth of a relationship. And I think we have to be gentle with ourselves and understand from both sides that it doesn't happen in a snap. And I get many surrogates that'll say, oh my God, I love my intended parents. Right. And then I'll get intended parents that go, oh my God, she's such an angel. And I get that. But then, like in any relationship, little things happen. And we have to work on how do we build in a skill set such that when things start to go a little bit, oh, well, I thought she did, and I went up, and all those little hiccups, because every relationship, and be it with your partner, with your parent, with your child, there's always hiccups. But the trick is, it's not the hiccups that we're worried about. We worry about how are you going to deal with the hiccups that we know are going to come? So, sorry.
Absolutely. No, and it is such a unique,
Yeah, I just,
it is. It's such a unique
you're
situation.
amazing, Jan.
Cindy has been, has 2 children through surrogacy and egg donation. I have been a
I can't
surrogate.
believe you just disclosed that
I
without my
know,
permission.
I know. And I've been a surrogate and a donor, and, um,
And I'm infertile.
yeah. And,
Well, at this age, all of us are.
yeah, I am too, thankfully. Um, I it is such a unique experience, and navigating the in between, the excitement, because we can get super excited when we match, and then I find myself sending my surrogate 26 articles on eating healthy during pregnancy, and now she's super annoyed with me, but I just wanted her to know, and it's going in and really acknowledging the intention of the intended parents as a surrogate, and acknowledging the intention of a surrogate who is telling you she'd like to breastfeed your child in the hospital, intended mom. And, in the contract, it said that you will be at the birth, and now she might not want you there. And she agreed to eat as a vegan, and now she's craving steak. And there are so many in betweens from, I'm so excited I matched, we're pregnant, we made it to 25 weeks, and there's like actually going to be a kid, to the delivery room, and all of those moments in between where we are holding our breath as surrogates, as intended moms, as intended dads, as intended parents. And, you know, I find myself becoming more and more curious about these moments between, because it's really where there's so much meaning. And as you said, Jan, culturally there are differences. I mentioned being a vegan. We have intended parents that would like their surrogate to eat halal, that would like them to eat kosher, that would like them to eat all of these certain ways. And Cindy, how as a lawyer do you talk to intended parents about that kind of a request, as well as surrogates saying, well, I need to breastfeed this child, it's good for me? And how do you balance that? Because I don't think they're legal things. Maybe they are.
You're not going to be able to enforce them anyway. First of all, legally, as I've just said before, courts don't want you coming in about kosher, halal, breastfeeding, vegan. But I think it's an issue, a social issue in the relationship that probably needed to be addressed at the intake level. So if you're speaking to intended parents come in, it's important for the agency to say, do you have any dietary issues that you would like to address now? Do you have views about breastfeeding? Because we know it's very common, whether it's pumping, breastfeeding, just providing the colostrum, or long term. These are things that the agency should be dealing with at the intake. And at the point where the legal intake is happening, for most fertility lawyers, that should already be information that's been agreed to. My firm does it differently. I like to do the intake sometimes even before the agency. And I will say, when you speak to the agency, you want to be open about all these things. And you do in your therapy session say why these things may be important to you. But if people say, I want my surrogate to eat vegan, and you're in the matching process, you should say, how do you feel about eating vegan? And if she says, like I would, not a chance, um, that's not a match you should make, unless it was maybe just a thing they thought, okay, well, we can give that up. But that should have been discussed in the intake. If it's really important to them, like kosher or halal might be more important because those are religious issues. And, they've had their therapy session and it's noted very clearly, this is really important, then the match should be about that. And if the surrogate's going to change their mind, which may happen, the intended parents still should be told, both in therapy and at intake and with their lawyers, you're never going to be able to enforce this. Like anything, the best way to get through this unique and incredible journey that Jan so eloquently described is with one word: respect. That covers everything. It is the culture of this country. It is everything.
So on that topic, respecting your surrogate's body, respecting the number of embryos she's willing to be implanted with, respecting her choice of care provider and place of birth. Surrogate agrees to an OB and hospital birth. She gets to around 20 weeks, starts feeling really strongly that delivering at home is a safer option for her. Um, you know, Jan, how do you think a surrogate should go about talking to intended parents about something that they have agreed upon and now she's, moving away from?
Again, I want to stress and I want to kind of emphasize exactly what Cindy said about how important these things are to be discussed. And I know what you're saying, Leah, is that people will say yes, and then they get further along in the pregnancy and they'll go, ooh, this is what I really, really, really want. But I think, again, some of it has to be explored as to what you are choosing to do, why you are changing your mind, and what the factors, so a move to a home birth is often something that's pretty frightening for an intended parent. Often, not always.
Yeah.
It can be because what if, after all you've been through and after all the time you've waited and all the money you've spent and you just want all the what ifs covered.
Yeah.
So I think what has to be understood is, was there a relationship that went sour with the doctor she was seeing? Is there a compromise situation? Can we look at the use of a midwife? Can we look at a birthing center? Can we come up with a strategy that will honor where she is coming from, but also honor and respect? And I love the word honor because it, in addition to trust and respect, honoring both sides is so important.
Absolutely.
Can we figure out what is going on? I mean, I will often have surrogates that will say to me that the doctor is dismissive or isn't particularly nice. And I really wish that I had seen a midwife because they give me time. But I've also had people that see midwives and go, I thought midwives were going to be the bee's knees and she sucks.
Yeah.
Because they're humans, we're all fallible. But I think the best way is kind of dissecting it and honoring where she's coming from, hear the whys, and see what solutions can we put into place where both of us walk out feeling okay, because that's where it comes down to. The end is that we all want a healthy, normal child. I want win, win, win. I want the surrogate to go, yes. I want the intended parents to go, oh my God, finally. And I want the child to get off to the best possible start.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like you said, in the beginning stages, I think that's really important. And Cindy, I know in your intake process, that's a part of the questions you have. And on that, I think, as we look at, like you said, Jan, as a surrogate, I work with people I would never have met. They lived in Winnipeg, they lived in Toronto, they were just different people than I was at the time 20 years ago and even now. And so there were a lot of things. And, I know that, I've seen this uptick in, surrogates finding intended parents on the internet and doing independent journeys. And while I believe that to be lovely, one piece I'm seeing often missing is having tough conversations, because there isn't someone to have it with. You're having to have it directly with the person, which I think creates transparency and can be lovely. And when I present an intended parent, a surrogate who clearly says, I will not terminate unless my life is in danger, that's pretty clear.
Mm-hmm.
And so in your assessment, is that something, I mean, I know the answer, but I think it's important for people to know the answer, that that in the counseling session, do you talk about tough things like
Absolutely.
termination and under what circumstance? And does that make a surrogate ineligible at some clinics if they won't terminate?
I don't think it makes it ineligible at a clinic, but I will
Okay.
tell you that I always talk to my surrogates. My surrogates, they're not mine, but they're mine. But I always talk to them. I say, have you had the discussions with your intended parents around 3 really important issues? And
Okay.
one of them will always be, I have to find where my hands are, views around termination.
Okay.
There's no right or wrong answer. Well, maybe there is, but we're not going to go there today.
Okay.
So termination doesn't mean there's right or wrong. You have to be on the same page.
Okay.
And I had one today actually that explained it just beautifully, that for her, it was, if it's anything to do with the baby, the quality of life, then the intended parents have the choice. And she said, but anything to do with my health, my well-being, it's my decision. And she said, that's what I'm going to be writing about in my legal agreement. But anyway, so we talk about termination always. Have you had that discussion? The second thing I always have them address is birth plans. That's a big deal. I want them to have the discussion. And you are right. You've just laid out an important situation where you can change your mind.
Yeah.
But have you had the discussion? And if you know that your intended parent feels very strongly that they are so nervous that they need to know that you need oxygen or CPAP, or it's all right there.
Yeah.
And you have to hear that and honor that. And then the third thing I like addressed is anything to do with breastfeeding and nursing, because I've heard it on both sides where surrogates thought, but I thought I would. And then I've had intended parents that are very freaked by, and rightly so often, about that bonding that they feel. But talk about it. There's no right or wrong answers. The other thing that I want to mention, which is not as those topics, is that I like people to at least have a chat about how they see the relationship working out. How often? What does communication look like?
Yeah.
How often do you plan? Kinda, sorta, you know.
Yeah.
And,
During and after, Jan. I think
was just
after
going to
is,
say that.
yeah.
So during, meaning, do you see yourselves? How often? What does it look like? I'm a huge fan of visual communication. I think texting is unbelievably fantastic. But as I always say to both the surrogates and the IPs, I want the surrogate to get to know the face of the IP. I want the IP to get to know the face of the surrogate. I want her to be able to look and read and go, ooh, she looks a little tired. Or is she getting enough sleep? Or I want them to be able to read each other. And, thanks to the miracle of all the platforms that are available between WhatsApp and Zoom and Skype and whatever the one we're on now.
Teams.
Yeah, but it's there. And then, of course, afterwards, because you have to go in with realistic expectations.
And Cindy, can you, as a surrogate, say, in my contract, I wanted to say my intended parents will talk to me every week. They will come to every appointment, and I will be seeing them after this baby's born, breastfeeding. Like, can types of contact be in a contract, whether enforceable or not?
Well, yes,
That's
you could put anything you want in a contract. I remember years ago, you and I were at a conference in Australia where an American lawyer spoke about what intended parents can put in their contract with the surrogate, and started off by saying, you're paying her, and you're paying her $30,000, $50,000, $80,000, so you can put in how much tuna, no tuna, every little micro.
no coffee.
I watched your face. It's like, so no, you can't. I don't think it's going to be that successful if you micromanage this person who's had more pregnancies than likely you have, which is why you need her. and you're losing a bit of respect.
But surrogate to intended parent, can we as
So when the
surrogates
surrogate's saying all of that, again, if I'm acting for the intended parents and I get this from the other lawyer saying she wants all these things in here, and they're like, how can we agree? First of all, how can you make a commitment about an emotional relationship in the future? That's not legal. But I might say to them, so what if you just agreed to everything and you carry on living your life after? I mean, you love her, you care about her, you want to have this relationship with her. These demands may be a little bit more than you're willing to say yes to, but you don't know how the relationship's going to develop in the next year. You may be very happy to have long term. And she's more likely to be the one with kids and pregnant to say, I can't talk to you today, even though we're supposed to. That's my experience. So, these are not legal requirements. Let me just say what is legally required to have a surrogacy arrangement. At a federal level, donors and recipients must be 18. Surrogates must be 21. No one in Canada can pay these people. They can only reimburse when they get expenses for them. That's the law. There is no requirement for anything else on a federal level. To get parentage, you're looking at provincial law. The requirement for them to get parentage, if there's an administrative process like Ontario, BC, PEI, soon Nova Scotia, is that the surrogate had independent legal advice and there was a contract that said they're to be the parents, and it was signed before transfer. If that wasn't done properly in a contract, they decide to waive legal advice because they know each other, it's a sister, it's a best friend, then there's a court application. You're just going to pay more, and you're just going to have to show the judge that you met all those requirements, and the judge will decide it. So you're bound to get parentage. There is no legal requirement of psychological assessments in Canada.
Yeah, what happened to that, Cindy? Why is Jan on a shelf over here now instead of in the light of counseling is required to ensure everyone is emotionally well?
Because so those are the laws, but then you have medical regulation. Each province governs doctors and how they must behave and do what's best and safe and everything. And so in that community, it has been established over time that the safest, best, healthiest practices are psychological assessment. Then there are sperm and egg regulations that came out only a few years ago saying what kind of actual medical testing is absolutely necessary. And then there's medical regulation, like a doctor should do no harm. So over time, doctors in the community talk about whether to transfer one or multiple embryos. There's no law. Abortion, for example, is a constitutional provision in Canada. So there must be an acknowledgement that it is the surrogate's choice, no matter what they've agreed to and how much money has been spent to get to the day. Parents need to understand that they cannot force her to go to the clinic on transfer day in this country and make her pregnant for them. That's not happening. Secondly, once she is pregnant, there is nothing stopping her from going and having an abortion on her own. She needs no one's permission in this country. Third aspect is if they want her to terminate because something tragically has been discovered in the fetus, she could refuse, regardless of what she told you and Jan and the doctor and me and the other lawyers. It is always her right at the last minute to decide what she wants to do and change her mind and change it again and again and again until the deed is done, until a timeline, once again, not by law, but decided by the medical community as to when abortion is no longer safe, which right now is like between 22, 25 weeks. Some countries, some states, restrict that timeline, but not in Canada. And it's constitutional. It would be so difficult to change it.
I really am grateful that in Canada, we as women are, you know, have the ability to be surrogates, to be egg donors, to make choices about our body and our autonomy, and that, you know, for myself, it has become a radical act of feminism for me to be able to support women who are going through this process in these community spaces, with sacred surrogacy and with, you know, retreats and with offerings that we are really supporting women through. And it's really great to have both of you, as such well-respected people in this community, having these conversations. You know, the biggest issue I see around surrogacy right now is the internet making it about rainbows and butterflies. And while surrogacy is beautiful, surrogates do get postpartum depression. Surrogates do fall into unsafe situations post-birth without support. The statistics are the same around postpartum depression, whether someone is acting as a surrogate, is an intended mom, or having their own child biologically through sex, as Jan said, which seems unheard of for us. And this belief that surrogates don't feel connected to these children. As a surrogate, I felt deeply connected, and that is how I was as a surrogate. You know, we don't want a baby growing alone. You know, it's these women are amazing, and that connection they have with this child and that develops hopefully with the intended parent is so important. And that we acknowledge these issues that we've talked about today, that we're not hiding and saying surrogacy is beautiful and your surrogate will do everything you say, or vice versa. Your intended parents are, you know, beholden to you for the rest of their lives. You know, this is an energy exchange. It's a beautiful process that we want to honor, respect, you know, and show up for people in these in-between spaces. And so thank you for being a part of our webinar. We will, as we send this out to people, we will provide details for Jan's group on our own. Jan, you have another group. Can you plug your other group as well?
I run a straight infertility support group, which the OOO meets on the fourth Thursday of the month. The infertility support group, which in March this month will have run since 1993. So 31 years every month for the last over 30 years. It's an infertility support group where, again, women and men that are struggling with issues of infertility just have an opportunity to talk and share and learn and emote and laugh and cry and establish community, because that's what we have been working, all of us in our career, is to help create a community where nobody feels alone in the issues that they're dealing with, that they know that there are all kinds of people out there that are going to do their darndest to support, educate, and care about them, about one another.
Absolutely. I'll also put a plug in for my group through Sacred Surrogacy. You can find us online. We have a Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time Women's Circle. It really is just an opportunity to be in community with women, talking about what we're not saying in our lives. And it really is just a beautiful, empowering time. So please check us out. I will attach Cindy's information so that you, for those of you who are beginning the journey, have an opportunity to talk about the legal process and really balance expectations against what is legally appropriate or required as a surrogate or intended parents. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we will be back with more questions and next time with a doctor to challenge as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Leah. This was a pleasure, and Jan,
great.
always listening.
Always.